Welcome to the next episode of the Top Innovator Series. My name is Joseph Martens. I'm your host and the founder of the Tech Executive Club. With us today is Joseph Shorter. Joseph held the role of CTO in a number of organizations, and he's been a tech executive in many other organizations. Joseph, it's a pleasure to welcome you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we just commented, right? It's March 19th, it's St. Joseph's Day, and here are two Josephs in the conversation. So could not be better, right? But that's not the topic. I would love to talk to you about leadership. Yeah. So I noticed one of the coolest things on your LinkedIn profile. I've never seen this before, and I just want to compliment you for that and encourage everyone to look at that. When I went to your contact section and looked up your website, it brought me to your resume, which was presented as a brochure with 20 or so pages. And that was just amazing. It had almost a manifesto, right? A leadership philosophy manifesto, opinion pieces on there. Tell me what drove you to do something like that.
Well, so Fluid Genius is a digital publication company, and I wanted to show an example of how you, especially if you're an executive leader, how you could present yourself in a different way, a more dynamic way. The cool thing about that site is that about that offering is that you can also embed video. So if you want to provide it something even more dynamic, you could. But it's an example. And I said, why not use myself?
Yeah, right. I loved it. I thought it was ingenious. And I really encourage everyone to take a look at this. I've never seen something like this before, and it's really neat. So a lot of the points that you put there about leadership, I'm sure they are part of the lessons learned, part of the experiences that you've had. When you reflect on your journey to get to where you are today, tell me, what do you think are some of the success ingredients that got you there? What got you to the point where you are?
I think it's been a pretty long arc, but I will say I feel like as looking back, I feel like some of it was almost ingrained in me in some kind of way. So as a child, I grew up in a very rough neighborhood. But it turns out when I look back, I became instantly the counselor of people who were doing not necessarily legal things. So I got this protection in my neighborhood because I became the counselor, talked to people, kind of started to show that. And I was pretty young in my teens. Then from there, I went into the Marine Corps, which laid a really good foundation of understanding what leadership is in a much larger, more real setting. And what I learned there essentially was you can't be a good leader unless you're a good follower. So it was really about, can you follow an order? Can you actually do what someone asks you to do? Not imagine what they said, but do what they asked you to do. And if you could get that down and understand why that is not as easy as it sounds, then when you become a leader, you kind of understand that dynamic and it helps your communication. But even after the Marine Corps, well, I shouldn't say after the Marine Corps, as part of my journey in the Marine Corps, I spent 9 years there. What I learned was how to be a servant leader. I started to realize I was to help others be more. It wasn't about me. It was about, like, my core job was make everyone else better, remove constraints from them, help them grow, help them become leaders. And that is just something I've taken with me throughout my entire career. I'm always there. My first job is for the individuals that I have to provide guidance and care for and grow. So I take it really personal. If there's a failure in personnel, I count that as my own. So.
Yeah, and I saw in your profile that you are on the board or working for a veterans organization as well, or you've done that, right? So, I get it that I've heard that often that leadership experience in the military is a really, really compelling path to leadership.
It is.
It does.
Yeah, and for the Veterans Matter specifically, part of my story, my journey is I was also homeless at a point in time. So
Wow.
being a veteran, being the CTO of an organization that's mission was about ending veterans homelessness was important to me. So I felt like if anything I could do to add my skill set to helping the organization be more efficient was the goal.
You talked about some really rough times there, and I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you get out of that? What's the drive? What's the push? Um, because
Um,
it sounds to me like a ton of self-leadership, right? So very often we talk about leadership leading others, but that's leading yourself in a rather remarkable way.
yeah, I would say, I am a religious person, so I have to give credit there because events
Hmm.
happen in ways that at multiple scenarios where my life should have been over, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to explain why that didn't happen on multiple occasions. So that's part of it. But like I said, I think I was born with propensity to lead, to step into the gap and do things, take some risk. Um, and my personality has always drawn
Yeah,
people to me.
yeah.
Uh, and I guess probably part of the other part is I'm never lacking of an opinion. So I guess
And that's a good thing, right? Because a lot of senior leaders want opinions and not have the vanilla stuff all the time. Yeah. Now
but
you talk.
what I was gonna say, one other thing. One
Uh,
of the things that early was I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy, but I
okay.
started realizing the best leaders get the smartest people in the room they with them because you can't know it all, you can't do it all, and that diversity of perspective and expertise is what really fuels a leader's ability to make impact. So anyway, you were about to ask me a question, so I cut
I'm
you
gonna
off.
ask you a different one now based on what you said. How did you learn that? So, right, great observation and great realization that this is helpful. And a lot of technologists, even though they might say it, feel differently. They want to be the smartest person in the room. Fair to say, your experience as well, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you shift the mindset? Was it an experience? Tell me how you went through that transformation of at some point wanting to be that person to now assembling the smartest people in the room.
Um, so so as I grew in my again it started in the military, of course, but as I got into my technical career, and by the way, in the military, although my job was uh, accounting, I actually took on a technical role.
Hmm.
And then I parlayed all that experience into the commercial side to continue my career. But what I wanted to say was is that what I started to realize was that as you go from one place to the other, you think you're the smartest guy, the coolest guy in the Marine Corps because you're doing all this cool technology stuff. I mean, the headquarters of the Marine Corps canceled my order, so I couldn't move because I've created and managed a budgeting system for the Marine Corps, the first ever. So I
Wow.
feel pretty good about myself. But when I got out into the commercial world, I realized, oh, how much I didn't know. And and I started to leverage those things that I learned in the Marine Corps, but also just surviving in tough neighborhoods, that you need to surround yourself with people who know things you do not know.
Okay.
Find mentors, even if they're not formal, but pick people who you say, okay, that person knows the thing. I like the way
Yep.
they learn,
Yep.
and start learning how to do that yourself. So it's just become as I've gone, I've learned more and more to add those that different opinion, that expertise from things I don't know to challenge my own thinking.
Yep.
Um, because and then I start working on how to listen to them more. Because when you're a leader, what can happen is you say something and everyone just follows you, instead of putting out an idea and having people like be creative and grow something that you wouldn't have thought of. And I sit back and listen and then ask questions because the question part of it puts me in a position where I'm not guiding the conversation. I'm just asking more clarifying questions so
Yep.
that the thing becomes more real for everyone in the room and the
Yep.
collaboration becomes more organic, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And it takes something to create that culture, to get people to speak up in those situations, right? And you have many organizations where people wouldn't dare say something and put a different opinion forward or challenge something. And you said something else really interesting there, and that was you have to realize, you have to know what you don't know. And that helped you move forward. I find it easy to realize that looking back in my life, looking back and then seeing, yeah, I wish I had known that at that point. And it's much harder to do it in the present. Asking you, right? You know where this is leading, right? So I'm gonna put you a little bit in the hot seat now. So looking at where you are today, what are the challenges for you? What are the things where you feel like you haven't fully cracked it yet? You're not at mastery level yet. I'm sure you have a high level of proficiency, but where you feel I can do better in that area.
So the short answer, everything.
That's a cop out. No, that's a cop out. Joseph, no.
Tell you why. Tell you why. What I've realized is that there's a difference between being confident in what I know, and being able to make decisions and get to a result. That's one thing. So I always bring my confidence into a conversation, and I always bring my own solution and how I would solve a problem. But I then add to it, assume that I don't know everything I know, and that other people may have much, much better ideas on how to solve the same problem. So it's a hard balancing act, because
Yep.
to the point, like, strong leaders are really strong personalities oftentimes, and they can control the room too much, right? But what happens to those types of leaders is that their influence is limited, because their ideas become stagnated, and the organization can only go as far as their own idea, imagination, and intellect. But when you step back and become uh, a person who can inject, but do it from a place of confidence, a place of humility, and understand that every day I get up, there is an opportunity for me to learn. And here's the key point that took longer for me to get to.
Okay.
Is out of college, that they're brand new to the organization, they have an idea that potentially I've never heard, or an idea approach to a problem that I wasn't thinking about, just because they're a new individual with a whole new brain, and they got here because they're smart, not because we just gave them opportunity, right? Like, you don't pay people six figures because you just like them. You pay them because they have some qualifications and they bring something to the table. And to not listen to that, not create a space where they feel like an equal contributor, is a disservice to the organization and to that individual. So I try to bring all that to those innovative conversations, or problem solving, sessions, so that I'm not saying this is what we're going to do. I provide the guardrail. I provide what the outcome needs to be, but then I step back.
Yeah, yeah. You talked about innovative conversations there, and I had this picture in my mind when you talked about the strong leader who is too strong, maybe too domineering, too much controlling, right? And that's an obstacle to innovation, right? Even though that person might be really gifted, might be excellent at their craft, but they're not that great in the innovation process. Fair to say?
Yes, I've actually
Mm.
right out of the Marine Corps, and the two of the people who owned the company were the smartest, even today, some of the smartest people I've ever met.
Okay.
One was very reasonable, one was antisocial. And when you were in a meeting with the antisocial, absolute genius in his own right. But you came in there in his sessions to follow his lead, not to offer anything else other than that, really. So it was so experiencing that also taught me how I didn't want to be.
Okay.
So taking all those experiences, in the moment, sometimes they feel negative, but you goes into positive things onto things you can control, and what type of leader you want to be, and how the outcomes you want.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Yep. Now, I've asked you about today, right? Assessing where you are today in your leadership journey. Let's look into the future. Let's pick up a cloudy crystal ball, and I'm going to ask you, where do you see Joseph's future as a leader? And I don't mean this in terms of organization, position, or anything like that. I mean this in terms of leadership development. What do you think if I see Joseph in 5 years? What's different?
Well, I have some core goals. One
Okay.
is one is that the people who become part of who interact with me remember me,
Mm-hmm.
and to the extent that I become a part of their story, significant enough that they want to repeat that story to others. And to the extent that they want to invite me even to their personal occasions like a wedding, things like that. Because to me, leadership has to be that personal, or it's just transactional. That's one. The other thing is, I feel like I got another book at least to write.
Okay. Okay.
That really kind of focuses on this a little bit
Yep.
more at times. And then as a part of that, maybe doing more speaking events
Got it.
around
Yep. Yep.
my particular journey and that around leadership. There's a lot for me to say on it. So
No doubt. No doubt. What you said there about the personal relationship, inviting people into the personal space, right? Again, a lot of technologists, especially early on in their career, have this idea that we separate personal from professional life, right? And the reality is far from it, is my sense. And it sounds like that's your experience as well, right? Leadership is so personal.
because we are social creatures, human
Yeah.
beings
Yeah.
built to be social. And if you take that aspect out of your leadership, first of all, I do believe that every person you put first, leadership is by permission. So if those individuals truly say, I'm going to choose you as a leader, I have to know something about them. I need to understand them on a much deeper level than just professional, right? What makes them tick? Uh, like I've had some people who work for me who can get more done in 20 hours than the rest of my team could do in 40. But after 20 hours, they're burnt out and they don't want to talk to
Mm.
you. Right? But how do you know that if you treat
Yeah.
everyone the same? How do you know that if you don't have more conversation, understand where they're coming from? I had a lot of individuals who were put on my team because they were problem children in the organization, who
Okay.
in 6 months turned out to be the stars because I asked them, "What's going on in your life? What's happening? Explain to me. How can I help you? Because I'm not here for me or the organization per se. I'm here for you. And if I'm here for you, then that will benefit me and the
Yeah.
organization. So how do I help you? How do I support
Yeah.
you as a professional?"
Yeah.
Turn to find out one of my staff members' child was going through a cancer treatment and it was affecting performance. No one ever asked. No one, you don't have to worry about coming to this meeting. In fact, why don't you take some time off?
Yeah.
Or if you have to be here,
Yeah.
reduce your hours. We got you. And when I did that, 6 months later, top performer. So it have to be human with each other. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it sounds to me the circle is closing to something that you said earlier about servant leadership, because that sounds like an excellent description of that servant leadership, that example that you shared there, right? Where you really are there for that person.
exactly. And again, the key point is learn leadership is by permission, and that I did learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you one more question about your leadership journey, and then we'll wrap it up. I would love to know about an aha moment that you had. Something that was not a progression, not a development, but an experience that you had, and something became clear. Something changed, and you saw something that you didn't see before, and it closed a blind spot, or something was different afterwards.
So, it's specifically to this leadership journey.
Uh-huh.
Um, I am a part of my I guess part of the DNA of who I am is I'm continuously trying to improve. Not just me, but everything around me. So I got into this cycle where I couldn't, it was definitely a blind spot where I thought I was complimenting my bosses and my peers about we're doing great, but here's some we need to do better. So here's some suggestions on how to do this better. What I didn't understand was if I taken myself out of the talker and then put myself into the listener, I was basically telling them you're doing a crap job. And I couldn't understand why it was continually being taken negative. It was a complete blind spot. Now, I will say it was an aha moment when I realized it, and it helped me modify my language, be more question oriented instead of statement oriented. But it is still a thing that I struggle with because my part of who I am is I want to improve, and I'm
Yeah.
passionate. And
Yeah.
I'm passionate about people, and that passion coupled with saying it the wrong way, constantly try to remind myself, and I try to enable others to say, if you hear me sounding like this, poke me on the side, let me know
Stop
that
me.
I can reset my
Yeah.
brain. So that that's my at least that's the one that came to mind when you asked.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for being with us today. This was awesome. The one sentence that sticks with me, and you repeated it, is leadership is by permission. That is, it sounds like a book title almost, right? It's a good summary.
That's
So,
hopefully you'll see that come out in the year.
I knew it. Thank you for being with us, Joseph. And
Thank
to
you.
everyone else there, join us again for the next episode in the Top Innovation Series. And until then, keep your brain cells active.
Be great leaders. Thank you.